Okay, guys, so today we're going to talk about lenses and images. These are notes that go over the lab that you did yesterday. Um, so before we get started, go ahead and answer the question. Okay, so some types of lenses we have convex, which you saw yesterday in the lab. So you'll notice that this convex lens, the light comes through and then it reaches a focal point, which means it has a focal length. It's also called a converging lens. So convex, converging, they both start with C-O-N-V. They sound the same. They are the same. It is wide in the center and thin at the ends. If the source is far away, so it's past the focal point, then it can produce this upside down real image like you guys saw yesterday, like you projected yesterday in the lab. But if your source is too close, then it can't project an image, and you have to look through the lens to see an upright image. It'll look virtual. When you look through that lens, it looks magnified, like a magnifying glass. A focal point is a point at which parallel lines of light cross each other. Okay, then you also have a concave lens. So with a concave lens, we call it a diverging lens because the light spreads out. It doesn't converge. It doesn't come together. It spreads apart. It's thin in the center and wide at the ends. The light, again, they spread apart. So it can never project an image on this side, but if we trace those lines back, it will make a smaller upright image on the other side, a virtual image. So if you looked through a concave lens, you would see whatever you were looking at would look smaller, but you can't project an image. You have to look through to see it. So yeah, so you should have just answered this, but you should have the convex lens should be converging and that concave lens should be diverging. So we can make different types of images with these two types of lenses. So we can make a real image. A real image can be projected onto a screen. The light rays actually cross at a point, and it is inverted or upside down. Okay? This is what you saw yesterday when we first held your cell phone up on the meter stick and you saw that image projected onto the screen. That's a real image. And it's upside down. It's inverted. And it can be larger or smaller depending on the position of the lens and the source. We'll talk about that more in a couple slides. A virtual image is more like you're seeing down here below in the corner, like a magnifying glass. It can't be projected. You have to actually look through the lens to see it, right? A magnifying glass doesn't make something look bigger unless you're looking through the lens. It's always upright, so it always looks exactly like the original object. I'm going to answer a few questions now. Okay, so what type of image is upright and reduced in size? You should have just answered this, but this would be, if it's upright, that makes it virtual. What type of image is inverted and can be larger or smaller? That would be real because it's inverted. So real images are always inverted, upside down, and virtual images are always the right side up. So what kind of image gets produced with each lens? Well, it depends on if the lens is converging or diverging. And if it's converging, it depends on where you place the object, like your phone, along that meter stick. So let's talk about converging first because that has a second thing that it depends on. So with converging, you see in this image, I put this candle past two focal lengths. Remember, we measured our focal lengths yesterday, so every lens has its own focal lengths. So 2f would be double that focal length. Okay, so f is the focal length. 2f would be double that focal length. If you place the object, candle here in this case, past two focal lengths, it makes a real image. We see that because the lines cross, so we get a real image. It's inverted because it's real, so it's upside down. It's on the opposite side of the lens. And it is going to be smaller than the original, and it'll be in between one focal length and two focal lengths. So for the next one, we're going to move it a little bit in. So this one was past two focal lengths. This one is going to be right at two focal lengths. So right at 2 focal lengths, or double the focal length, it's going to again make a real image on the opposite side. It's actually the same size as the object. So see, this one was smaller. As we get closer to the lens, as we move from past 2 to 2, the image is going to get bigger, but it's going to get further away. So you see this image was in between 1 and 2. At 2 focal lengths, it's a little bit further at 2 focal lengths. 2 focal lengths, 2 focal lengths, and it's the same size, same distance, same size at exactly 2 focal lengths. This is, we have a student in the building named, so again, this is converging, but now we're moving the candle even closer to the lens. So originally we had it out past 2F, now that it was smaller than the object. Now then it was at 2F and it was the same size. Now it's even closer. It's between 1 and 2 focal lengths. And it again makes a real image, but now it's even bigger. So bigger than the actual object, and it's even further away from the lens, past 2F. So as your object moves closer and closer to the lens here, your image is going to move further and further and further, and it's going to get bigger. Okay, and then you have at the focal length and inside the focal length. So at the focal length up here, you'll see those rays of light are not going to cross no matter what. They are parallel, parallel. And so that at the focal point, you will get no image. If you get closer to the focal point, that's where you get that virtual image on the same side as the object, which means you have to look through the lens to see that. That's like a magnifying glass. It will be larger if it's shorter than 1 focal length. So you should have gone ahead and answered this question. So now let's talk about the answer. In the image, the object is more than 2 focal lengths away. What kind of image would be produced and where would it be? Well, we know that as long as it's past a focal length, it's going to produce a real image on the opposite side that gets projected. If it's real, it's going to be inverted. Okay, so it's got to be D, which would give a larger image. So where would you have a larger image? If it's outside of 2F, remember that's way out, you're going to have a smaller image. If it's between 1 and 2, you will get a bigger image, but also you can get a bigger image if it's between the focal length and lens, less than 1 focal length, and just be virtual. This didn't ask for real, so it is both B and C. For this one, for B, you would get a real image. For C, you would get a virtual image, but they would both be larger. All right, last thing, diverging concave. So you guys did the diverging lens yesterday in the lab, and you should have seen a couple of things. So you should have just answered these questions. So the concave or diverging lens did not make a real image because the light rays didn't cross on the other side. It did make a virtual image on the same side as the object. And it was smaller than the object. All three of these will always be true for a diverging or concave lens. So with converging or convex, depends on where you hold the object, how far, where it's at. For diverging and concave, these three things will always be true. It doesn't matter where you place it. You're never going to get an image, a projected image, a real image on the opposite side, and you're always going to get a smaller, upright, virtual image on the same side, no matter what. The closer you get to the lens, the bigger the image, but it's always going to be smaller than the original and upright. And then also, whenever an image gets reduced or magnified, it changes its distance by the same amount that it changes its height. So it's going to get magnified by the same amount, and it's going to change its distance by. You should have just answered these questions, but diverging lenses always produce an image that is upright, and if it's upright, that makes it virtual. Diverging lenses always produce an image that is, it's always going to be smaller than the original. If the image can be projected, then that's a real image, and diverging lenses don't make those, so it's got to be converging or convex. And that's it. Make sure you do your check.